Okay, all right.
Okay.
You guys, I'm so sorry. They updated our computers today, and I was working the dental reception. I come back to my office, and it's still updating. I unplugged it from the wall and just plugged it back in the middle of the update, so hopefully it's okay. But hello, thank you so much for joining us. How'd y'all do with the challenge last week to eat plant-based breakfasts? Did you get some in ya?
Couple.
All right, excellent.
After I found well, I ordered some blue cornmeal from Amazon.
Yes. All
Uh-huh.
apologies for sending y'all to Oriana. I didn't know that they didn't have it. I was like, "Where did I get mine then?" I thought for sure there. Um, how did you like that? Was you surprised?
No, it was very good.
Oh, good. All right.
I mean, it didn't taste that much different from regular oatmeal, so
True, true. All right. Anybody wanna share in the chat, what you ate? We have another person on if she wants to share in the chat, she sure can, but our lesson is a little long today, so I'll go ahead and get it going since I already logged in late. Um, if you ran into any challenges, you can put those in the chat. We'll try to help you with any challenges you had with us last week's chat. And remember, your handouts are in the email, and I'll put them in the chat as well. And today's topic is the power of our plate, so I will get that going. All right.
Welcome to Lesson 2 of Native Food for Life. Once again, my name is Whitney Brooks, Registered Dietitian Nutritionist from the Seneca Nation. Last week, in Lesson 1, we were introduced to the power of plants in our diets to prevent and treat the root causes of diabetes. We met several inspiring people who showed us just how much can be improved by changing how we nourish ourselves. Also in Lesson 1, we had our first cooking skills demo that went over the basics of cooking knives and safely chopping vegetables, as well as a recipe for a delicious blue corn mush with squash. Lastly, we discussed our first weekly goal, which was to try a plant-based breakfast. Were you able to start your day with a plant-based breakfast on one or more days? Remember, when we set a goal for ourselves, our goal should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Setting goals is really important. Have you heard the expression, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail? Instead, plan to succeed. Use the acronym SMART, or SMART, to set these goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a goal that is an okay goal, but it's not a SMART goal. Saying, I will eat more healthy foods. This is a good thing to do, but as a goal, it needs more information such as, when will you do it? What do you mean by healthy foods? How often will you do it? And how will you measure your success? Here's a SMART goal. For 5 of the next 7 mornings, I will eat a plant-based breakfast. Or, for the next 6 days, I'll make myself a plant-based breakfast and text a photo of it to my sister. I really like this one because it also builds in some accountability. My sister and I can encourage each other. Each week in this class, you will have a chance to do a challenge of the week. I hope you will create a SMART goal around each week's challenge and plan to be successful. This week in Lesson 2, we are going to hear from Dr. Neil Barnard and Susan Levin, registered dietitian, both from the Physicians Committee, who will discuss in detail the origins of insulin resistance and how plant-based diets can help our bodies heal from that state. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Carolyn Trapp, who will talk to us about important numbers that you'll want to keep track of, such as blood pressure and blood sugar, in a video called Know Our Numbers. This week, we'll also cover our bean basics, from why we should try to eat more and how to prepare them. This week's goal will involve beans. And as usual, we'll show you an important cooking skill and a new recipe to try. So let's get started.
I'm Dr. Neil Barnard, Thank you for joining me and my team with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine to ask, what can be done for diabetes? Is it possible to turn this disease around and to keep adults and children from getting it in the first place? Well, diabetes has taken a horrible toll across this country, especially on American Indians and Alaska Natives. 30% of Native Americans have a condition called prediabetes. And if nothing changes, they're likely to develop type 2 diabetes. Well, first, some preliminaries. What is diabetes? Normally, when we eat, foods are digested and they release a form of sugar called glucose, which moves into our bloodstream and eventually into the cells of the body to give them energy. But in people with diabetes, glucose has trouble getting into the muscle cells in particular. You've probably heard that diabetes is related to a hormone called insulin. Well, insulin is made in the pancreas, which is an organ in your abdomen. And insulin is like a key that opens the doors of our muscle cells to let glucose in. Now, some people have type 1 diabetes. And in these people, the pancreas is no longer making insulin. And insulin injections are the life-saving treatment that they need. But most people with diabetes have type 2 diabetes. Their pancreases are still making insulin, and for them the problem is insulin resistance. That is, their muscle cells don't respond normally to insulin. They've got plenty of the insulin keys, but the locks are not opening up. And there's a third kind called gestational diabetes. It occurs during pregnancy. It goes away when the baby is born, but it's a sign that type 2 diabetes could be right around the corner. In this program, you'll learn about a natural and healthful way of eating that could help you to reduce or even eliminate your need for medication if you have type 2 diabetes, and it will lower your risk of complications from any kind of diabetes. To track our progress, there's a blood test that measures the level of diabetes control, and I've asked diabetes nurse practitioner Darilyn to give you her take on this important test.
The A1C level is a blood test that's used to diagnose diabetes and to track your progress. The higher your A1C level is, the more at risk of complications you're at from uncontrolled diabetes. So it's a really important test to know about. And you want to ask your healthcare provider, what's the target A1C level for you? Is it 6.5%? Is it 7 or 7.5%? Find out what your target is. Now, just because you've been told you have a high A1C level now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get complications from diabetes, because this test can change over time. If you make some significant changes in what you're eating, you can have a lower A1C level. And that's what this program is all about. Dr. Barnard is going to talk about what is the best way to eat to lower your A1C level and prevent those complications of diabetes.
Let's consider, why do some people get diabetes and others don't? Well, the Native Americans who've been studied the most in relation to diabetes are the Pima of the southwestern US and northern Mexico. And in the 19th century, Americans diverted the water supply the Pima had used for irrigating crops, and it caused a massive disruption in their ability to grow traditional foods. And then 20th century US government programs started supplying non-traditional foods, canned meats, cheese, milk, and egg mix, along with some canned vegetables and fruits and dry cereals. But breakfasts of eggs and bacon and sausage became common, and hamburgers and pork chops and cheese are now everyday fare. But south of the border, things are different. The Mexican Pima live in the Sierra Madre Mountains, and they've been pretty much untouched by the changes in food availability that occurred among their American relatives. The Mexican Pima work on farms, they plant and harvest crops, they get regular exercise, and they have an abundance of healthful, traditional foods, beans, corn and wheat tortillas, potatoes, seasonal produce like zucchini and tomatoes, garlic and peppers, melons and peaches and apples. And in 2006, a team of researchers compared the health of these two groups, and the results were dramatic. An average Pima man north of the border was 60 pounds heavier than men south of the border. While diabetes was pretty rare in Mexico, it was a huge problem north of the border for those over 55 years of age, 3 out of every 4 had diabetes. So, while genetic factors do contribute to diabetes risk, it's really clear that this north of the border diet, high in animal protein and fat and low in fiber, has fueled this epidemic of diabetes. Another group in Mexico, called the Tarahumara, are well known for their athletic prowess, running for vast distances. And their traditional foods are pretty similar to those of the Mexican Pima. In 1991, an American research team convinced 13 Tarahumara men and women to try a westernized diet as part of a research study. And the results came quickly. Over 5 weeks, the average study participant gained 8 pounds, and their cholesterol levels rose by 30%. Now, here's what I make of this. The foods that promote good health are corn, beans, all the traditional plant-derived staples that are native to the region. So why are these plant-based foods so powerful? Well, first of all, they help keep people trim, but there's another reason too. You remember how in type 2 diabetes, glucose can't get into the muscle cells properly? The sugar in the blood, glucose, it has trouble getting inside the cells because the keys are not working. That's insulin. If the insulin keys can't open up the muscle cells, glucose can't get inside, well, what is stopping the insulin key from being able to open the muscle cell? What's gumming up the works? Well, it looks like the problem is fat. Fat building up inside the cell. Look at this drawing of a muscle cell. Under normal conditions, you wouldn't see very much fat in the cell, but this cell is full of yellow blobs of fat. And that comes from the fatty foods that we eat. It could come from a hamburger, from chicken, from fish, from canned meats, or from cheese, or even from vegetable oil, olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. Any fatty foods, they all end up clogging the muscle cells, and that makes insulin ineffective. And if insulin can't do its job, then the muscle cells don't get the glucose that they need for energy, and then the sugar that can't get into the cells builds up in the blood, and that is diabetes. But here's the good news. Studies have shown that when people switch to a diet that's very low in fat, that emphasizes the traditional plant-based foods, these blobs of fat start to melt away. And without all that fat in the way, insulin can do its job. And the blood sugar levels can fall and even return to normal. Now, fortunately, a plant-based diet makes it easy to avoid all that excess fat. Plant foods do have a little bit of fat, but just the amount that our bodies actually need for health. Not enough to clog up our muscle cells and keep the insulin from doing its job. So, with the support of the National Institutes of Health, my research team decided to try a dramatically different approach. If fatty foods are clogging up the muscle cells, we aimed to see what would happen if we used a diet that had very little fat in it. We brought in 99 people, all of whom had diabetes. And let me describe their experience. A man named Vance came into our research study. Vance's father was dead by age 30. Vance was 31 when he was diagnosed with diabetes. He was in his late 30s when he came in to see us. And what we asked him to do was to set aside animal products, because if there's no animal fat on your plate, then no animal fat is going to sneak into your cells. We also asked him to keep the oils very low, so that meant no more taking that bottle of oil and going glug, 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 glug into the pan when you're cooking. But those were the only rules. Set the animal products aside, keep the oils really low. We didn't worry about calories. We did not count carbohydrates. We did not limit portions. And Vance and all the other participants were free to eat all the bean burritos and corn tortillas, and veggie lasagna, blueberry pancakes, split pea soup, anything else that they wanted that fit the rules. Over the next year, Vance lost weight and lost weight and lost weight, eventually losing about 60 pounds. His blood sugar came back down to the normal range. He got off his medications, and all traces of diabetes had disappeared. And when I asked for his permission to tell his story, he said, "Make sure you tell everybody that my erectile dysfunction got better too." Write that down. People's blood sugars dropped, their weight came down, and their cholesterol levels fell. And then we asked our participants how they felt about this diet change. I mean, after all, They weren't eating beef or chicken or cheese pizza or any of those things, but many said this was the easiest diet they had ever been on because we didn't make them count calories or starve, and most importantly, they were regaining their health. Maybe you'd like to try out this way of eating. Let me introduce you to the Power Plate. You'll want to build your meals from these 4 healthy food groups. The first is vegetables. Start with green leafy vegetables, kale, collard greens, chard, spinach, and all types of lettuce. Other great vegetables are broccoli, cucumbers, onions, cauliflower, carrots, and of course, all types of squash. The list goes on and on. Enjoy your vegetables fresh, roasted, or steamed, just not fried in oil. And seek out a rainbow of vegetables, all different colors. The colors represent different nutrients that are good for us. The next group is grains. They're hearty, they're filling, and there are so many to choose from. Corn is a healthful grain that turns into so many great meals. Rice, oats, barley, amaranth, quinoa, millet, and there are many more too that are indigenous to different areas. And you might cook a little more than you need because cooked grains can be frozen and reheated later for a quick meal. Whole grain breads and whole grain pastas are also part of the grain group. Now the third group of the Power Plate is the legume group, which includes beans, peas, and lentils, anything that grows in a pod. So that means pinto beans, black beans, garbanzo beans, kidney beans, navy beans, lima beans, the works. They're low in fat, they're high in protein, they're rich in calcium and iron. Beans are great in stews and soups, and you can even make them into burgers. They can replace the meat that's used in a lot of recipes. And what's the world's easiest convenience food? It has to be a can of baked beans. But make it vegetarian, of course. The last group on the Power Plate is the fruit group. Now, you might have heard that people with diabetes shouldn't eat fruit, but think about it. Fruits are really full of vitamins and healthy fiber, so you don't want to miss them. And when you're eating a healthful diet, you'll find that fruits are really pretty gentle on your blood sugar. You'll also notice what's not on the Power Plate. Keep in mind, our goal is to turn diabetes around, and we really want to succeed. So we'll leave off the animal products, the meat, the dairy products, and the eggs, and that's going to eliminate all of the animal fat. We'll also minimize the vegetable oils, and that gives our cells the best chance of cleaning out the fat so that insulin can start working again. So now you know about building meals from the Power Plate. Very easy. Maybe you have some questions about nutrition, and you're wondering, can I really get everything my body needs from plant-based foods? Well, here to answer that question is registered dietitian Susan Levin.
Hi, I'm Susan. Maybe you want some reassurance that plant-based diets are best for you and your family. Well, you should know that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the world's largest organization of nutrition professionals, published a position statement that said plant-based diets are safe and beneficial for all ages. And they can help to prevent and treat many chronic diseases like diabetes. But you know, I didn't learn much about plant-based diets at my university, and maybe your healthcare provider also was not taught about this when he or she went to school and has never recommended it to you. Fortunately, though, more and more healthcare professionals are now learning about this approach. Not to get too technical, but here are a couple of key points about plant-based nutrition. First, what about protein? Do humans need to eat animals to make muscles strong? The answer is no. Beans, greens, and grains are excellent sources of protein, and they don't come packaged full of saturated fat and cholesterol. If you get enough calories, you are most likely getting enough protein. In fact, some pretty exceptional athletes eat plant, not animal, sources of protein. They know it's the healthiest way to go, and as a runner, I couldn't agree more. Take ultramarathoner Scott Jurek. He has run and won the Western States 100-mile endurance run 7 times in a row. And you know, some professional football players, hockey players, and basketball players also get all their protein from plants. Want more evidence? Consider the animal kingdom. Many large, strong animals such as horses, oxen, gorillas get their protein from plants. How about iron? Iron is needed to keep red blood cells healthy. Iron can be found in green leafy vegetables, grains, and beans. people who do not get enough iron in their diet might develop anemia. Vegans and vegetarians actually consume more iron than meat eaters, and studies have shown that vegans and vegetarians have no more anemia than people who eat meat. Plant-based sources of iron are more healthful and easily accessible. This is true for infants as well, although starting with an iron-fortified solid food may be recommended. Calcium is another nutrient that we have learned about through commercials on TV. Calcium is important for strong bones, but the ads tell us that we need to drink cow's milk to get our calcium. Do humans need milk? Only if you are an infant, and cow's milk is best left for the calves. Most green leafy vegetables, such as kale, collards, broccoli, beet greens, and others, are great sources of calcium, and the calcium in these plants is twice as absorbable as the calcium found in cow's milk. Want something to put on your cereal instead of dairy? Try soy milk, almond milk, any non-dairy milk. Most grocery stores carry these, or make your own. You can find recipes online for non-dairy milks. You might wonder, how does non-dairy milk taste? Non-dairy milk may not taste like cow's milk to you, but each variety is delicious in its own way. And after a few days of almond milk or rice milk on your cereal or in your coffee, cow's milk will be a thing of the past. What about vitamin B12? Okay, here's one place that a supplement is a good idea. B12 deficiency can lead to nerve damage or it can cause anemia. The government recommends, and we agree, that anyone over the age of 50 take vitamin B12, because as we get older, we don't absorb B12 as well as we did when we were younger. In addition, if you follow a plant-based diet at any age, be sure to take a B12 supplement. Some foods are fortified with B12, such as some breakfast cereals, but your safest bet is to take a B12 tablet. So, if you are wondering, can I get healthy and strong on a plant-based diet? Think of the big, strong animals that live on foods that grow in the ground. And remember the athletes that get their fuel from plants with winning results. Finally, know that plant foods plus a vitamin B12 tablet provide the essential nutrients we need for optimal health.
Thanks, Susan, for making it clear that a plant-based way of eating is just what the doctor ordered. So, how do you get started? Well, first, let's think about some meal ideas. What we want to do is to find a couple of breakfasts, a couple of lunches, and some dinners that you like. So let's start with breakfast. How about a big bowl of oatmeal with cinnamon and raisins? Or maybe blueberry pancakes or veggie sausage, not meat sausage. And give these foods a try and just see which ones you like. For lunch, how about a bean burrito or a bowl of veggie chili? For dinner, vegetable stew, spaghetti with wild mushrooms, or beans or rice, whatever else calls to you. Again, we're going to leave out the animal products. We're going to keep the oils to a minimum, so take a week or two and just see what really works for you. Next, when you're feeling ready, jump in and take a 3-week test drive. During this time, you'll want to eat the foods that you already know that you like, and they're free of animal products, but give it 100%. 3 weeks is long enough to see results, but it's also short enough that it's manageable. And chances are you'll feel better and you're going to want to keep going for more than 3 weeks. But don't take my word for it. Try it yourself. One word of caution before you get started. If you take medications for diabetes or high blood pressure, work with your healthcare provider. For some people who shift to a plant-based diet, medications become too strong. Even if you have never had low blood sugar or low blood pressure, this can really happen. So be in touch with your healthcare provider before you start your diet change. Your provider might decide to reduce your medicines as you go along. Now, a few foods are a little bit challenging for people to get away from. And it doesn't mean that you have a lack of willpower. It just means that this is the way these foods are. In our research studies, some people have trouble getting away from cheese. Yes, it's loaded with fat and loaded with cholesterol, but some people have trouble setting it aside. The reason apparently is that cheese contains some opiate chemicals that make it almost a little addicting. Other foods that people tend to get hooked on include meat, sugar, and chocolate. You know what I mean. But if you get them out of your diet for about 3 weeks, you'll discover that your cravings start to fade away. So let's wrap up. Here are the key points that I'd like you to remember. Type 2 diabetes really can be turned around with a plant-based diet using the Power Plate as our guide. Now, results vary, but many people lose weight, they have better blood sugar levels, they need less medications, they have more energy. Focus on eating less fat, and you can do this by setting the animal products aside, keeping the oils low, and think about giving it an all-out try for 3 weeks in a row. See for yourself how this works for you. Food really can be medicine, but fortunately, as you'll see, it doesn't taste like medicine.
Here are some important questions to answer to make sure we understand key topics. The answer will be shown after a short pause. And remember, there's no pressure. Question 1. Diabetes is caused by bad genes. Is this true or false? This is false. Diabetes does not run in our genes. Diabetes only appears to run in families because families tend to eat the same way. Research has shown that when the Pima people were separated by the US-Mexico border, only those on the Arizona side have high rates of diabetes. Question 2. If you have been told that you have pre-diabetes, you will get diabetes in the future. Is this true or false? This is false. Pre-diabetes should be considered a wake-up call. The time to take action is now. This program is full of great ideas and actions that you can take to get off the road to diabetes. Question 3. People who have type 1 diabetes don't make enough insulin to control blood sugar, while people with type 2 make plenty of insulin, but certain foods can cause insulin not to work. Is this true or false? This is true. People with type 1 diabetes must get insulin injections, though a plant-based diet may lower the amount that they need. Some people with type 2 also need insulin, but with this diet change, their ability to use their body's own insulin may improve enough that they don't need any insulin. Question 4. The most common type of diabetes among Native Americans is type 1 diabetes. Is this true or false? This one is false. Type 2 diabetes is the most common form. About 90% of people with diabetes have type 2. Question 5. Diabetes that develops during pregnancy, also called gestational diabetes, usually goes away after the baby is born, but can mean the mom is at risk for getting type 2 diabetes later unless she makes changes in the types of food she eats. Is this true or is this false? This one is absolutely true. A mom who is diagnosed with gestational diabetes does not have to go on and get type 2 diabetes. Question 6. The name of the blood test that will tell you if your blood sugar level has been in good control over the last 3 months is called A. Blood type, B. Hemoglobin, or C. Hemoglobin A1C or just A1C. The answer is C. Question 7. Which strong animal gets its protein from plants? A. Gorilla, B. Elephant, C. Ox, D. Horse. Actually, the answer is all of the above. Note that our closest relation, the gorilla, who has the most similar digestive system to ours, gets very strong from eating plants almost exclusively. This concludes our Check Your Understanding section.
Hi, I'm Dr. Carolyn Trapp. I'm a nurse practitioner with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and I'm back today to talk to you about knowing your numbers. Specifically, I'm thinking about numbers for blood sugar and blood pressure and cholesterol. Let's take a look. first, why do you need to know your numbers? Have you heard this expression? If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. That was said by Peter Drucker. He is the man who invented modern business management. He wrote 39 books on this subject and is widely regarded as the greatest management thinker of all time. His statement is also true about our health. It can be helpful to know where we're starting from. Just a reminder though, these numbers for your blood sugar or your blood pressure, they don't measure your value as a person. They just give you an idea of the level of risk you might have for future health problems. If you have a number that you don't like, you can take steps to improve it. And this series of classes is a great way to take control of your numbers and your health. The first measurement we'll talk about is blood pressure. Blood pressure is a measure of how hard your heart has to work to pump blood out into arteries. It's the force of blood pressing against arteries. Blood pressure is measured by wrapping a cuff around the arm and inflating it and listening with a stethoscope or with a machine. That cuff is called a sphygmomanometer, but don't worry, that won't be on the test. This chart of target blood pressures is available in the handouts that you can download to go along with this course. The person checking your blood pressure will give you two numbers, what we call a top number and a bottom number. The first number that you get, or the top number, is called the systolic number. And this is the measure of how much pressure is required when your heart contracts, squeezing blood out against the arteries. And an optimal systolic blood pressure is less than 120. And then if you look down this chart, you can see an elevated blood pressure is between 120 and 129. High blood pressure is anything above 130, and up to 139 is stage 1 high blood pressure. 140 or higher is stage 2 high blood pressure or hypertension. If that first or top number is higher than 180, that is a medical emergency and you want to get treatment right away. Those are the first set of numbers. This last column shows you the bottom number, or the diastolic blood pressure, and that is the force in the arteries when the heart is relaxing. And this number, optimally should be less than 80. Elevated is above 80. High blood pressure is anything between 80 and 89. Stage 2 high blood pressure is 90 or higher, and anything above 120 for that second or bottom number is requiring medical care. One reason that we worry about high blood pressure is because it can increase the risk of strokes. However, there is a lot that can be done to lower blood pressure. And the focus of this course is foods, and there are a lot of foods that help. Foods that are high in potassium can help to lower blood pressure. The reason for this is the more potassium you eat, the more sodium you lose through your urine. Potassium also helps to ease the tension in the blood vessel walls, which helps to further lower blood pressure. Increasing potassium through diet is recommended in all adults who have blood pressure above 120 over 80. And here's some ideas of some delicious foods that are high in potassium. Any kind of tomato or tomato product, leafy green vegetables like bok choy or Brussels sprouts or kale. Raisins or figs are high in potassium. Mango has plenty. Winter squash. Bananas are often the food that people think of for potassium, but did you know sweet potatoes are also high and lentils and other kinds of beans are great sources. So it's easy to get all of the potassium you need just by filling up on fruits and vegetables and beans. The next number we'll talk about is cholesterol. Cholesterol is a waxy substance that's made by the liver, and it forms the walls around cells in the bodies of animals, every kind of animals. Interestingly, there is no cholesterol in the cells of plants. So you can only get cholesterol from it, you can only take cholesterol into your body by eating animals. Cholesterol is only a problem when it's too high. We all need a little bit, but our modern diets often raise cholesterol. And to find out how much cholesterol you have in your blood, clinicians order something called a lipid panel, and this requires a blood test. And usually the blood is drawn from the arm or sometimes the finger. It's very important that you fast, usually between 8 and 12 hours before this test, to get an accurate reading. Too much cholesterol can lead to atherosclerosis. This is a big word for a big problem. It means narrowing or hardening of arteries from a buildup of plaque inside the blood vessels that reduces blood flow and oxygen supply to organs. When there's a decrease in blood flow and blockage, it can lead to heart disease, it can lead to a stroke, peripheral vascular disease, chronic kidney disease, and a piece of plaque inside these vessels can break off and get stuck, and then it blocks blood flow, or it leads to a blood clot. Anyway, we want to try and avoid this. The symptoms of an atherosclerotic event, such as a heart attack or a stroke, in the heart, it can be chest pain or shortness of breath, or nausea or vomiting, or a sense of impending doom. In the arteries leading to your brain, you can have numbness or weakness in the arms or legs, difficulty speaking or slurred speech. People often have drooping facial muscles during a stroke. And if the blockage occurs in blood vessels going to arms or legs, there can be painful cramping when walking, or coldness in the in your feet, or changes in the color of limbs, or hair loss on the limbs. So certainly if you have any of those symptoms, you need medical attention, but we want to focus on avoiding all of this in the first place. And one of the best ways to prevent atherosclerosis is with diet change. So what are the problem foods to watch out for? Well, remember I said that it's animal foods that have cholesterol. So we want to avoid things like eggs, well known as being high in cholesterol. Also, any kind of processed meat and meat that comes in cans. Chicken is often said to have less cholesterol than red meat, and that's true, but it's not that much less, and it's definitely a source of cholesterol. And if you're worried about cholesterol, it's a great idea just to set those foods aside. This chart shows the targets for total cholesterol numbers. Below 200 is considered desirable, and that's a low risk for having heart disease. Between 200 and 239 is considered borderline high, and 240 or higher is considered very high, and somebody with that level of cholesterol has twice the risk of heart disease as someone whose cholesterol is below 200. Your total cholesterol is actually a mathematical calculation, and it comes from adding the HDL and the LDL cholesterols together. The HDL cholesterol is considered good cholesterol. That's why I put a green arrow here. And the LDL cholesterol is also sometimes called the bad cholesterol. And you add those two numbers to 20% of your total triglyceride numbers, and that gives the total cholesterol. Now, you don't have to do this math, but it's useful to know what these different numbers are that your healthcare provider may tell you about. HDL is the first part of that equation, and HDL, remember, is the good cholesterol. And I have a picture here of a dump truck and a digger Dan because that represents the action of HDL. It carries away the bad cholesterol. So for HDL, we want high numbers of HDL. So if you're below 40 for men or below 50 for women, that's considered low. And 60 or above is a good target. There is an exception to that, though. If your total cholesterol is low, then your HDL might also be low because you don't need any of these dump trucks to carry away bad cholesterol. So again, work with your healthcare professional. HDL, though, isn't maybe quite as important a number as the next number we're going to talk about. And that's your LDL cholesterol. And that's the bad cholesterol, and it's linked to the risk of heart disease. So this is a really important one to ask your healthcare professional about what's your LDL number. If it's less than 100 or around 70, that's the best. Up to 129 is considered near or above optimal. 130 to 159 is borderline high. 160 to 189 is high, and anything above 190 is very high. Another part of the cholesterol panel is a triglyceride level, and this is just another type of fat that we don't need in our body. A normal triglyceride is below 150, and I've got some pictures here of greasy food and also alcohol. Those are both known to raise triglyceride levels. This chart shows you some things that raise and lower cholesterol. So at the top of the chart, we see, not surprising, meat, which instead of meat, if you make a burger out of beans and lentils, that's a great low-cost, protein-packed way to lower your cholesterol. In the second column, we see milk and cheese and yogurt, and you could replace those foods with non-dairy options for milk and cheese and yogurt. Maybe have some soy milk or some almond milk or some avocado instead of cheese. Instead of eggs, you could use tofu in your cooking, either firm tofu to make a tofu scramble, or a silken tofu is great when you're baking muffins or banana bread. And then instead of fish or poultry, which can be high in cholesterol, you could replace those foods with whole grains. The next number we'll talk about is body mass index, or BMI. And this is a measure of body fat based on weight in relation to height. BMI is a calculation. It's weight in kilograms divided by height in meters, or weight in pounds divided by height in inches, times 703. But you don't have to do that calculation to find out your BMI. The easy way to calculate BMI is to look at a chart, and this is available in the handouts for download. And the way you use this chart is you can see these different colors. They represent measures of weight. So the blue is underweight, the green is a healthy weight, the yellow is overweight, the orange is obese, and the red is extremely obese. And across the top of this chart, you see weight going from 100 up to 215, And on this side, you see height from 5 foot up to 6 foot from 5 foot up to 6 feet 4 inches. So let me just show you how this works. I'm going to plot myself. I'm 5'2" and I weigh about 135. So if I go across here from the 5'2" and down from 35, I come up with a BMI of 24. So I'm just on the very edge of the green healthy weight. Let me show you one example though where BMI doesn't work. And if you think about fat or muscle on our body, which weighs more? Well, muscle is actually a lot heavier than fat. So it's possible if you are very, very muscular, you will end up with a high BMI, which really isn't unhealthy. So here's an example. Tori Washington is a professional bodybuilder, and he is very proudly fueled only by plant-based foods. Yes, you heard me right. He's built all these muscles just on plants, and his BMI, he weighs 175 pounds, and he is 5'7". So that puts him right here. If we go down here from 175 and across from 5'7", and oops, actually, he's got a BMI right here of about 26 or 27. So that puts him in the overweight category. And to look at him though, you can see he looks great. Want to lower your BMI? It's easy, just eat plants. Plants are naturally low in fat and high in fiber. Here's an idea: eat at least a cup of beans each day, such as black beans or chickpeas or lentils, any kind. The last set of numbers we're going to talk about are those that measure blood sugar or blood glucose. And glucose in the blood supplies energy to all the cells in the body. One test is the fasting blood sugar test. This measures your blood sugar level after an overnight fast. A glucose tolerance test measures blood sugar before and after drinking a sugary beverage. Another test is a random blood sugar test. This means it can be after you've had a meal, and you can take this test at any time. There's no need to fast. And the last one is an A1C, and this measures your average blood sugar over the last 3 months. These numbers can be used to diagnose diabetes. A normal blood sugar fasting, so that's going without eating, would be below 100, or a random blood sugar test after a meal would be below 140. If your numbers are just a little high, that can be a sign of pre-diabetes, a fasting blood sugar between 100 and 125, or a random test between 140 and 199. And then diabetes is diagnosed with a blood sugar of 126 or higher fasting, or above 200 after a meal. If you've been diagnosed with diabetes, then we look at different numbers for blood sugar. We're concerned about hyperglycemia, which means high blood sugar, and this is usually defined as a blood sugar of 150 or higher, though it might be 180 for some people. Check with your healthcare provider as to what's too high for you. The symptoms of high blood sugar include frequent urination, drowsiness, nausea, extreme hunger and thirst, or blurred vision. On the other end, we have hypoglycemia, or low blood sugar, and this is usually defined as a blood sugar reading below 70, although for some people, you might be told below 80 or 90 or even 100 is too low for you. And we talked about this in the first class. Symptoms of low blood sugar are feeling shaky or sweaty or confusion, dizziness, weakness, and if untreated, it can lead to seizure or even a coma. So the best way to control blood sugar numbers, you keep hearing this over and over, plants. They are naturally low in fat and high in fiber, and those are characteristics of foods that keep blood sugar levels at the right level naturally. So here's some examples of foods to enjoy, and it's an assortment of fruits. Whole fruits like apples, oranges, and pears, or frozen berries, but not fruit juice or canned fruit in syrup, are the best choices, even for people with diabetes. So there you go. We've talked about these important numbers: blood pressure, cholesterol, weight and BMI, body mass index, and blood sugar. These numbers are maybe even more important than the winning lottery number. And this program that you're part of right now is a great way to get yourself great numbers that you deserve. Next up is the fun part of class where we go into the kitchen. But before we do, I want to invite you to start thinking about the challenge of the week. This week's challenge is going to focus on beans, and we want to encourage everyone to eat more. Set a SMART goal for yourself. Here are some ideas. I will eat pinto or black beans for dinner 3 nights this week. Or I'll have a cup or more of beans every day. Or you want to save some money? How about I will soak dried beans on Saturday night and cook them on Sundays, so I'll have beans to eat all week long. We're going to go into the kitchen next, first with Chef Dr. Lois Ellen Frank, and then you'll see a recipe demonstrated by registered dietitian Whitney Brooks.
Hi, I'm Chef Lois Ellen Frank, and I want to talk to you about beans. Beans are an integral ingredient in plant-based cooking, and I have a lot of varieties here. I like to cook my beans from scratch, and I use a slow cooker, but you can also get canned beans. Canned beans are a convenience food. They're a lot more expensive, so I try and not use them as much, and unfortunately, canned beans also have salt. So if you want a less expensive, better way to make beans, I'm going to show you how I do that. I make beans at least once a week, and I like to cook them in my slow cooker. So what I do is I take 4 cups of beans, and I'll fill my crock pot with water. I'll bring it to a boil, turn it down to low, go to sleep. The next morning I wake up and I have the most amazing beans, and they can be used in any recipe. I'm going to show you. So we start with, for instance, kidney beans. These are the dry version right here. And then once they cook, these are better than canned beans. You can see how perfectly plump they are. I've got really nice juice, which I like to use because I can use that bean juice to saute in. But I just want to talk briefly about some of these beans that are indigenous. Beans, of course, going back thousands of years, very important to Native people. And if we start, so a bean is a legume. And if we look at like a split pea or a lentil, which are also very, very tasty, they don't need to be soaked. They don't need to absorb as much water as other beans. Here we have a variety of beans, and I've got a kidney bean, which is one of my favorite. They turn dark and they're delicious and they're very meaty. The pinto, which is probably the most famous and the most common. Again, it plumps up, it's really nice. And then we start to have some other indigenous beans. Here we have a Anasazi bean. The term Anasazi actually meaning the ancient ones or those that have been here before. And these beans turn almost like a light egg color. They're light brown, they're very beautiful. And we also have here a tepary. Now a tepary bean it originated from the Tohono O'odham people. These are people that live to the south in southern Arizona. And this bean actually is higher in protein, than any other bean on the planet. We actually think that this bean is going to have a big future in terms of nutrition and all of the wonderful flavors. And the Tohono O'odham people have actually started to reintroduce this bean. They planted this bean. So the tepary beans, it comes in white and it also comes in brown. And this very small bean, but it's absolutely a delicious bean. I make hummus from it. I make a bean terrine. I do a lot with the two colors, and I actually like to cook them separately and then bring them in as different components in a color. And then what I also have here is a black and white bean. This is also called a cattle bean sometimes. This is an heirloom bean. And what I mean by heirloom is that actually these beans could actually be planted and we could use these in our garden to grow beans. So beans, very, very important in Native American foods, in the history and in the cooking. They're delicious and they're nutritious.
Hi, welcome back to my home kitchen. Thanks for joining me today for our recipe demonstration. Today we're going to go over a refried beans recipe, vegetarian style. So let's get started. We're going to start by cutting up our very small red onion. You can use any kind of onion that you want, red, white, or the yellow cooking onions, but I like red because they taste just fine raw and they have a nice color. But I found a very small one that was perfect for this size. But if you end up having a larger one, you can just cut up a small portion of this for this recipe. All right, here we go. Just gonna chop the top off, put this aside. I really like this recipe because it's very, very easy to make. And it's full of pinto beans, which I really love. They're very smooth and creamy when you blend them together. But on top of that, beans are a great source of fiber and protein, which, as we've discussed, is a very powerful combination. But you're also getting a lot of good nutrition from the beans. You're getting your iron, you're getting all kinds of vitamins and minerals, and you're also getting your resistant starch, which feeds your good bacteria. Okay, now that I've got my little red onion peeled, I can chop it up. I'm just going to cut. I want it into little pieces just to help the food processor as much as possible. Remember, I'm going to keep my nails and fingers away from the knife. I'm just going to cut this up here. So, nice little dice. It doesn't have to be perfect because this is going to get blended up in the food processor. But these are going to give this dip, well, whatever you're going to use it for, it's going to give the beans a lot of really good flavor. So, I have a little bowl here. I'm just going to put this in my little bowl. Now that we have our small onion chopped, we have everything we need to finish assembling the recipe. So here we have 3 cans of rinsed, very well rinsed pinto beans. I have 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. And in this bowl, I have our spice blend, which includes 1 tablespoon of each of salt, cumin, garlic powder, oregano, and chili powder. All right, now we can start adding our ingredients into the food processor. So I have a really small food processor, but we're gonna make it work. So I rinse these beans off really well because it's going to get rid of a lot of the excess salt that's used in the canning process. We have all of our beans in our food processor. All I'm going to do is add the remainder of the ingredients. So we have our small onion, our 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, and our spice blend. Now we can blend it all up. All right, let's get these blended. Now we have our beans to a really nice chunky puree consistency. Now we can take it out. Okay, I'm just gonna put a little bit of this mixture into a small dish here. for demonstration purposes. This smells really good. So the recipe said refried, but there's actually no frying involved in this recipe. And as you noticed, I didn't add any extra oil or any other fat source. So this recipe is actually low calorie as well. So all I'm gonna do with this small portion is microwave it. And it's gonna smell really good after I heat it up. Okay. Now that I've got my heated portion of the bean dip out of the microwave, all I did was just set it on a plate with some cut up carrots and celery, and it also goes really good with these non-fried chips that I made. It's just a corn tortilla heated up on a pan, and I cut them into nacho size by starting from this. One last thing to note is that if you have any issues digesting beans, at least initially, all that means is that they probably haven't been a regular part of your diet, which is okay. But the way to overcome this is to start with small portions and have a little bit every day, and then you can build up to having beans whenever you like and it won't bother you. So just stick with it and any initial discomfort will go away. So once again, thanks for joining me in my home kitchen, and I hope to see everybody next time. Thank you for joining us for lesson 2. I hope everything we covered today was informative and motivating. So I encourage everyone to take on this week's challenge to eat more beans. So come back next week for lesson 3, where we'll learn about the longest living populations from all around the world, and very importantly, what all of those populations have in common. So until then, have a great week and enjoy those beans.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of great information covered in there. If you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the chat or answer. You know, we have a small group. Go ahead and just chime in if you want to. In the chat, I put some resources in there on beans, so a little motivation there. Anybody have any favorite type of beans already? Do you already love beans? You can share it in the chat or we can talk about it. Also, does anybody anticipate any hurdles? Anything that, you know, like if you can't tolerate beans, or you're thinking maybe you can't do this. So they say you could start with the lighter colored beans. So you don't go for the black beans or the red, dark red kidney beans right away. Those are going to have more gastric issues if you do have those. So go for the lighter beans or the white beans or peas like that, or the lentils. So those can be a good way to introduce small amounts if you have any issues. But one of my favorite things to do is, just like she was saying, is put the beans in the crock pot, and I either put them in that night before I go to bed, or I put them in the morning before I go to work, so they'll be ready whenever I need them. I always freeze a little bit. We'll try to eat them all with salads, with our wraps, as a chili. We make hummus. The best way to get beans in you every day is to just to get a little bit of hummus, put it on your wrap, put it on your salad, just eat a couple tortilla chips and the dips, a cup, you know, every day, just to get at least 2 tablespoons to a quarter cup to a little bit more. In the chat, there's that roasted red pepper hummus, my favorite. I love that one. There's one at Costco. It's pretty good, but you know, it's a great big bulk one, but you get that great big bucket for $5. You can church it up with your own spices. And then I did see that recipe for beet hummus. I have been wanting to try that one. If anybody tries it, let me know. I do have some beets. I was gonna chop them up for salad, but I might do this the hummus. So today's, you know, this challenge is to eat more beans. So in your goal, you can write down your goal, or you can keep it in your mind that, you know, what kind of beans you want to try, or if you come up with some ideas and it works, let us know. One thing I do is I'll make a bean soup, or I do a bean chili, and I'll have as many beans as I have in my chili, or 15, 16, 17 beans in my soup. And we meal prep, and I make that once a week, and it sits in the crock pot. We'll put it in the fridge. We'll bring it back out. And just so we have something easy, and it's beans. Let me tell you guys, when I introduce beans to everyday I used to eat beans, 2, 3, 4 times a week, but now it's beans every day. This summer, since June, I've lost 41 pounds, and I know it's from beans. So if you want to lose weight, beans are the way to go. If you're trying to gain weight, you can still eat beans. We'll just get you the heartier kinds, and you can put some nuts, pine nuts in them, put some avocado in there. So we can go either way with beans. Oh my gosh. So in the chat, no beets so some folks have that gluten intolerance, or they have like a gastric distress when they have certain items. So if you know your body, they say try to introduce small amounts, but if you know that they just don't agree with you, you do not have to try the small amounts. The beans with the most protein, the most out of area is a Tipperary bean. It's a white bean. It's an ancient bean that found in the Southwest. So you can go for that kind of bean. The navy bean, the Michigan Northern white bean, also comes in right below that Tipperary bean. And, it's a Michigan white bean. And maybe that's why it was called the Yankee bean, because it's from the North. So that little white bean, it packs a punch. And they also called it navy beans because it has the longest shelf life out of all the beans. It has lots of protein. And so Navy ships would take those Michigan white beans and use them on ships, and they became, named navy beans. But that's a great one. And I love navy beans because that's one that you can do sweet. If you're tired of, liquid smoke or churching up your beans with chili powder, go sweet beans. So do a little bit of maple sugar in there, or maple syrup. If you want to, have salty beans, but without the salt, great option is to put a tablespoon of vinegar in your beans. It will taste salty without adding more salt, and the vinegar taste evaporates off, so it'll just leave that salty taste for you without extra salt. So lots of bean tips. If you have any hurdles during the week, email me, call me, let me know that we can work through those. I grew up in Texas, and we had beans all the time. I thought we loved beans, but we were poor. So come to find out, we were poor, and that's why we ate beans so much. So beans are one of the cheapest foods you can buy. You can get them in bulk. And when you soak them overnight, put a little bit of baking soda in there, and that will help take the gas out of them. It also helps them soften faster. And then just make sure you rinse that water out before you bring them to a boil that next day or later on when you cook them. But that'll help take the gas out. So, oh yes, we'll have to send some recipes. All right. I will get my bean recipes together. When I do the follow-up to let you know that the video is posted, you can look at the bean recipes. Just today, the communications department got that shared folder figured out with me, and that is available on the GTB Indians website under the Special Diabetes tab. So if you miss a class, you can go there on the website and look. The handouts are there. The survey is there. If anybody's watching this and you didn't come to class for the first episode, and maybe I didn't remind you, if you're watching this from the website, do the survey for the first class. And then there's one at third class and there's one at sixth class, but make sure you do the surveys. I know everybody did them in this class last week, but anybody that's coming in, I got one that came in this week, make sure you do the survey. And so we got the survey. Okay, here's a great thing for the recipes. In the handouts, there's this thing called Switch. There's no T, it's SWICH, and it has an amazing resource of recipes. So sometimes if you just have a few ingredients, you can go put an ingredient in and do a search that you have one ingredient and you want to use that, and it'll bring up recipes that use that ingredient. But use thebigswitch.com, and there'll be more food recipes there you can try out. Okay, so I think we may end here. Anybody have any questions? Anybody want to add anything? Okay, yes, recipes, please. And low sodium. Okay. Well, I do the low sodium one, and I do have one that is specifically for kidney disease. And I know, kidney stones, disease, but it has something to do with the kidney. So I'll make sure I share those in the email too. Okay. We think we got it all. And then by tomorrow, I'll have that link up again, and I'm just going to go ahead and put it on the YouTube, so you can look at YouTube, or you can reference the GTB website in case they get busy. They couldn't get my video up. There's no questions. I got thank you in the chat. Everybody's good. All right, we'll let y'all get home and start eating some beans, guys. We'll see you next week. Good luck. Baba P.